might wear a certain style of clothing, you know. Like when I was in Hawaii, I kind of wore the Guayabera shirt, you know, and or the Aloha shirt. And I was up in Nevada a couple of weeks ago, and while I was up there, I bought a couple of shirts with the snaps on the front. They look kind of like, you know, cowboy shirts. I just wanted so bad to say, "Possum up a gum tree," you know, when I put that on. But your style of clothing varies. Or it might be the make of car you prefer, or what sports you do or do not like. These are choices we make. They're very arbitrary choices. There's no right or wrong. A little closer maybe the TV shows that you watch, the books that you read, the movies that you go to. And then, of course, the totally unexplainable style of music that you like. You know, I think it's so interesting to me. I love all kinds of music, and there's so many different styles, aren't there? Isn't that great that we have all these different kinds? And then, of course, what style of worship you have. Do you want the traditional style, or do you want contemporary praise, or a little bit of both, or whatever? And then what preaching you like. You know, some people don't feel you're preaching unless you're walking on your pat leg, standing in a bucket of sweat, walking all over the place and yelling and screaming, you know. I remember one time W.A. Criswell was asked to preach, and he's a rather expressive Baptist minister, and they asked him to preach in a Presbyterian church, and so, you know, they have this podium that you go up into, you know, and you're standing there over the congregation at the side. And he was leaning out this side, and he was leaning out that side, and this little boy in the front row was getting rather wide-eyed, you know, and his mother said, "What's the matter, Jimmy?" And she says, "Well, I'm just afraid of what he's going to do if he gets out of that thing." People like different kinds of preaching and different styles. Many choices are just a matter of personal taste, where we were brought up or how we were brought up. And many of our choices change as we get older. But there's something else that used to be a part of our upbringing that I thought was pretty healthy, and that was we were taught to respect and tolerate the choices of other people, even if we didn't understand why they would choose to believe what they did. It was called toleration. In other words, toleration didn't mean I tolerate them, but it means that I gave people the freedom to believe what they chose to believe, because nobody has the right to force anyone to choose what they choose, or live as they live, or believe as they believe. That's part of our God-given responsibilities. We've all seen through Nazism and communism and fascism and other dictatorships the ill effects of forcing an ideology on people. And even we who are Christians cannot and must not try to force anyone to choose Christ. Now, that doesn't mean that I abandon my beliefs. I may pray for those that I believe are lost with a broken heart. I may try to convince them that Jesus is the way of eternal life and forgiveness of sins. I think we can present a very compelling case for what I believe, but in the end, I must allow the other person to believe what they believe, to make an individual choice to follow or not follow Christ. I may not agree with their choice, but I will defend their right to believe what they do. Are you with me? Understand where I'm going with that? But in our day, there's been a change of paradigm, a change of thought in the way that the 21st century people think. And instead of toleration of another person's belief, that is, I give you the right to believe what you want, relativism has crept into our society. Now, what is relativism? Well, tolerance says, I may not agree with your choice, but I'll defend your right to believe as you do. But relativism teaches that, now listen to this, that all beliefs are equally true. In other words, it plays out like this. You've probably heard people talk like this. If a person chooses to believe in a personal God who loves him or her, then they say, well, that is truth for that person. But if another person chooses to believe that there is no God, or that he or she is just simply here by random choice and has no future in heaven or hell, they're just going to go into the ground and fertilize it when they die, then that's their truth. That's truth for that person. In other words, they will say to you, well, you have your truth and I have my truth. In other words, what they're really saying is there really isn't any such thing as absolute truth. The truth is just what you decide it is. Actually, what the person is saying, and I think this is rather humorous, there's absolutely no such thing as absolute truth. That statement is self-contradictory in itself, because it's making an absolute. The absurdity of talking in such a way or taking such a position, listen to the conversation that took place thousands of years ago with Protagoras and Socrates. Protagoras taught, whatever you believe is true. Whatever you believe is true. To which Socrates replied, well then, my dear Protagoras, I believe that you are wrong. You see, that statement, of course, is totally self-defeating. In the law of philosophy, there is what is called the law of contradiction, and that says if one statement contradicts another, both statements can't be true. I mean, that's basic understanding. There is a God and there is no God cannot both be true. Those statements can't both be true. And so that's a fundamental thing. You can't say, well, that's your truth. Because people don't have individual truths. Truth is truth, whether anybody believes it or not, see. In other words, there is truth. So that leads me, of course, to something else that people say today. You know, I'm sure you've all sat under some teacher that says, just visualize what you want your life to be, and it will come to pass. Or some version of that. So I want to come back and make this statement. What a person believes does not determine what is or is not true. In other words, what you believe doesn't make it true. Or to put it another way, I had somebody tell me one time, well, I believe that with all of my heart. And my answer was, so? So what does that mean? I believe that with all my heart. You know, you might believe something wrong with all your heart. There's a lot of people who believe a lot of things with all their heart, whatever that means. But what we're talking now about, what a person believes does not determine what is or is not true. A Christian can say, I believe in God. An atheist can say, I don't believe in God. But neither of those statements determines whether or not there is a God. Does that make sense? What a person believes doesn't determine what is true. So whether you believe in God or don't believe in God doesn't determine whether there is a God or not. Now let's switch the thing a little bit. How many of you have heard this? Well, I just don't believe there's a hell. I just don't believe there's a hell. I've heard a lot of people say that. I don't believe there's a hell. Oh, well, that straightens it out for me. No, it doesn't. It doesn't straighten it out for anybody. Because you could be totally wrong in what you believe. The secret, of course, of understanding right and wrong is to learn what God says is true and come into conformity with that. So statements don't determine what is true. If there is a God, he exists whether anyone believes he does or not. If there's a hell, it's there whether they believe it or not. What you do or do not believe does not define truth. But having established that in our mind, and I want you to nail that one down, equally true is, now listen to this one because this is a parallel truth. What you believe affects every part of your life. What you believe affects every part of your life. Let me give you an example. If I believe that there is a God in heaven who loves me and wants only what is best for me and is someday going to call me to stand before him in judgment and I'm going to live with him forever, If I believe those things, my life is going to be lived out with a strong sense of commitment